What up, everybody? Scuffy here, and we have got another card-by-card reboot we're doing today. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Death Guard faction, which is the last in the original factions released in the game. The original factions were being Sons of Horus, World Eaters, Emperor's Children, and Death Guard. We're going to take a look at how they have aged, how they have been adjusted. The Death Guard have seen numerous ups and downs, adjustments, and the game itself has evolved beyond what they were originally planned for or envisioned for. If you're playing the new event, speaking of which, just today, the Death Lord deck for the second Battle of Prospero was taken down. This is no longer a viable deck. It still works for those of you who have just run it in the event, and this is a Death Guard versus White Scars event to determine who the fourth Warlord is, and this is a prime example of what the Death Guard can do. If you're not having fun playing against Mortarian, or you're not having fun being Mortarian, or you find Mortarian mirror matches frustrating, believe it or not, that is one of the many pros and cons. It's a duality of the Death Guard. So we're going to take a look at the deck here. We're going to take a look at the faction cards, and specifically what cards are worth including, what cards are worth passing, what things have passed their prime. We're going to start with the Warlords here. We're looking at Callous Typhon. Now, Typhon's ability himself, his ability to heal 3 has never changed. That's always been his ability. And he has the Destroyer Plague. I've got him for, I think, my frontline challenge deck. Now, the Destroyer Plague is a new card that was added to give him a little bit more oomph. Thematically also kind of ties something there too. So it's a reflection for 2 energy, and he can destroy a troop that has received poison, which within a faction that relies heavily on the poison concept, it's very easily to wipe your opponent's board. For 8 energy, just 8 energy alone, you can use Death Cloud to poison all your opponent's troops in play, kill 2 of them outright, and then the others will die accordingly. Granted, conversely, for 7 energy, you can use Death Cloud and then Silent Death much more effectively. In addition to that, you've also got a 9 energy drop. For instance, you can use Specter of Death, which we'll talk to here in a little bit, and that poisons an adjacent troop, so then you can use Death Plague and kill 2 troops for 9 energy. It's a hard removal, that's great, but his ability to heal 3 is really what kind of gives him the longevity. It's not fantastic, it's not offensive whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the only way that you could use it offensively is if you're facing a warlord like Kabanda or Angron, who has no choice but to attack you, and gradually you should, by virtue of the war of attrition, you should outlast them health-wise. Now, Dirk Rask, on the other hand, is a much more mid-ranged, versatile warlord. His ability here is passive to destroy structures and vehicles damaged by attacking them is huge. First off, vehicles are consistent, they're out there heavy. Structures are often the banes of existence for people, whether they're Mount Pharos, Pyramid of Tisca, various barriers and bunkers that are frontline units. More recently, arcology is a big problem. Dirk Rask can simply attack that low attack structure, destroy it, and then if you've built your deck right and you've timed yourself, you have something to follow up with and wipe out that unsettled populace. But his normal ability is also nothing to scoff at. For 2 energy, he can deal 4 damage to a damaged non-warlord enemy. That includes Titan weapons. So basically, if you built your deck designed right, with some ping cards in there, some minor damage cards, for 2 energy, you can wipe out a 6 health, 7 health troop. And that requires very little effort on your end. It might require some combos with what you have on the board as well as what you're playing. Dirk Rask is a very good warlord. He's medium initiative, he's kind of mid of the line, but his fluctual concept in terms of how he can operate aggressively, attack a nasty vehicle, take a hit 1 time and get rid of it, or just throw grenades and destroy it from afar. He's a very good warlord, and I recommend, if you're looking to start into the Death Guard, once you get through here, I'd recommend starting with Dirk Rask, just because he's a lot more forgiving. Maybe Nathaniel Guerra. Now, Mortarion has changed quite a bit as time has gone on. Now, his ability way back when used to just be for 2 energy, you could stun an enemy. But then they gave him this ability to remove stun or and poison from a friendly troop. So that was a pro there. As you can see, he plays very consistently. He plays very dominantly. The problem is his playstyle in itself. Not only is he low initiative, but he is a slow game. It is not likely that you're going to have a Mortarian game that is under 7 minutes unless you are losing very quickly. His is the long game. His is utilizing all the big cards to the end, drawing everything out. And it's a style of play that has not changed. It's been around since day one, but it's not a style of play that a lot of people enjoy, and therefore it doesn't get seen a lot, even though it's a direct counter to a lot of aggressive decks out there. Sometimes if you're playing Mortarian and you find yourself losing against an Angron or a Kabanda, really the key is when did you got to take a look at when your turning point was. There's no reason for Mortarian to lose against Angron, but I have played plenty of Mortarians as Angron and beaten them because they've made a couple key mistakes in the game. They didn't stun when they should have stunned, or they didn't put down a troop or capitalize on what they had out on the board, and that gave me the one key opening I needed to take advantage of it. He's a very strong, very solid warlord, and he's actually really good. But as the event has shown, and this is granted in a bottle of the event, he draws on, he wears on people. He's not something that a lot of people enjoy enduring, whether that is in his opponent or as the player, and that's really a big trade-off. Now his normal ability is way superior to his Whisper's ability, which has improved as well. His Whisper's ability, he used to be just poisonous, and he would have heal, I think he had heal 3 at one point, then they changed it to heal 4, and then they gave him unstoppable, which he did not have before. And his cost has gone up and down. It's really hard to get, even though it's 20 and it only costs -1 when a troop is poisoned. Initially, it used to be -1 when a troop dies from poison, which was even harder to do because not only did you have to poison them, then you had to ensure that they died from poison, which meant using your ability exclusively to stun them. And if there's multiple units on the board, that's just hard to do, as well as you're losing your own units if you're using a card like Death Cloud. So he's not for everyone, and he requires the full attention span to play him, as well as the full range of cards to really get the most out of him. Nathaniel Guerra, on the other hand, is very forgiving. He's easy to build. He works really well with a lot of neutral cards if you're using a lot of cheap, low-cost troops, because his ability is very simple. After putting a troop in play, he can act again. I use him often for the use your Warlord ability multiple times in a combat challenge. You pay 2 energy, he can heal 2 to a friendly unit, or he can just attack again. However you want to play it. If you empty your hand right, you can attack, and you can easily do anywhere between 4 to 10 damage plus, give or take. Or you can heal just that much as well. Now, healing is a little bit more energy conservative, but it certainly is an option, and it's effective. So if you've got a lot of neutrals, you don't have a lot of Death Guard cards, Guerra is definitely a way to go. Rask is also a good starting warlord. Meldon Squad. These guys used to be 1/5s, believe it or not. I think they could be a 2/5 today and still be just as functional. I feel like they're just the unsung guys of the faction. You might include these as a solo card in your Guerra deck for their simple fact that they've got low cost in their front line, but they're not something that you normally include in the deck. They come as a result of first wave generating 3 of them. They're not fantastic, but they do the job. I'd like to see them a little bit better, but we'll take it as it is. Now, Blight Grenade is a good tactic if your opponent has a lot of troops on the board. If they don't, you're just getting 2 for 2. But if they've got a lot of troops on the board with low health, it's very possible you could Blight Grenade them all. You could use Dirk Rask and Hidden Arcology, and then throw a Blight Grenade, and effectively, very potentially, wipe out that entire populace, and all for 2 energy. You didn't even have to play anything to get rid of the Arcology. That's a pretty good trade-off. I often prefer 2 of those in a deck, but there are some decks that I won't have a Blight Grenade in, because there are some neutral cards that are a little bit better option, just in terms of how they operate, or the other effect, whether that's removing stun, healing, dealing a little bit more damage to like a vehicle or something like that. But these are a good card. Communition is not a good card. For its stat, it gives +1/+1 and poisonous, and very rarely is that poisonous going to matter. If this cost 1, or if it gave +2/+2 in poisonous, it would be worthwhile. It doesn't do it to... It just doesn't do anything for me. Defensive Maneuver was recently changed a few months ago, and it's actually one of a really good card that they've got, because it's cost effective, and you could potentially get multiple cards for 2 energy, which normally card drawing is a tricky thing. You're either paying 1 for a trade-off, or you're paying 2 for a significant, and this here you get 2 for a significant advantage. There's no negative there whatsoever, unless your opponent just has 1 Warlord, in which case you're paying 2 to draw a card. But it is a good card, and the Death Guard really need to have some cards in hand to help support their troops. Core Targ bikes, these guys are ideally the best 2-drop option for the faction, and that's not saying a lot. They're 3/2, they've got a decent backlash, so you play them down, and basically if your opponent doesn't have any troops, you're dealing 5 damage with them on your opponent's Warlord. And that's about it, though. You're not getting a lot of value out of them, aside from maybe throwing your opponent off in the order that they play their troops. I'd like to see them with the 3 attack, or 3 health rather, but I think they feel like they've aged a bit. They're still functional, they still do good. They're very good with the Rask deck if you put them out late game, but early game, they're just 5 damage. And you can get that out of other cards that offer other support better, so Shield Up, I don't include this often. You can throw it in a Mortarian deck or a deck with Death Shroud, but it feels like a waste. You're fully healing a friendly troop and you're giving it frontline. There is enough healing in the Death Guard card pool and the neutral card pool as a whole to really not need this card, as well as giving frontline. It feels like a super redundant thing. It'd be like if the Salamanders had a card that gave their troops Survivor and pay 1 energy and deal 1 damage to an adjacent unit. Now they have cards that are similar to that, but those are more offensive, whereas this is purely defensive. Surak bikes, these are very good cards to have. These are commons. These are probably the better common in the set. Surprisingly, it's a fast card for the Death Guard, who are not famous for being fast, but these work very well. This card was changed. I don't think they used to be fast, or if they did, they were, man, that would be a long time ago. Maybe beta when they gave them fast. But this is a very good change. It makes them effective supports. You can use them in a Garrow, and like I said, you can with just 2 energy, Sorak bike, you can use Garrow and attack 3 times for a total of 6 damage there, and then you still have a bike on the board. The Reaping was changed recently. This used to be a terrible card, and now it is a semi-terrible card. It stuns an enemy troop, and if it has received poison, you destroy it. Which, if you're playing poison, again, if you've got Typhon and you're playing poison, then you already have the Destroy Plague, which just straight out destroys a troop that's received poison. You don't need to worry about stunning them. If you have Mortarion, you already have stun. So it's maybe good in Rask, maybe good in Garrow, but Rask and Garrow don't play with poison, so it has maybe applications in event decks, but not within the Warlord decks that it's aimed for. Wall of Bodies, once upon a time, before Dirk Rask. And I say Dirk Rask because he's the 4th Warlord that was added, so like beta times. Before Dirk Rask, Wall of Bodies was, such a pain. You would come across this card in events, and if you could not deal with it and answer it right away, this could quickly become a nightmare of a troop frontline to deal with. The game was very heavily focused on dealing with troops and frontline, and you could turn this into a 1/6, a 1/8, a 2/8 with command bunkers next to it. You could heal it with Garrow. You could just constantly buff it up, and your opponent would not be able to respond to you, and they'd have to use their hard removal cards just to get rid of this Wall of Bodies. It is not that way anymore. This card, if at most, is a speed bump. You get better speed bumps out of Ornatov's Barge. I'm not saying that this is a terrible card. For beginners stepping into the game, this is still a daunting card. But the meta itself, the game itself, has offered so many more options that can answer this card that it's not effective. Just the fact that the tactic Breach can deal with this card single-handedly is really what it was designed for. When that tactic came out here, it was designed for cards like Wall of Death or Command Bunker, any of the frontline troops, because frontline was such a problem. Believe it or not, it used to be a really big problem. Which was a good game state, but the Death Guard could pump out more frontline than anybody else, and there was nothing you could do about it, and you just couldn't handle it. And then they could throw out wall of bodies at the end and just have this massive frontline troop that you had no answers, that you had no way that you could possibly get rid of it. Those days are gone. Now, Captain Yu-Gi-Oh! This is probably the best legendary. And there are some good legendaries in the set, but Captain Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the most utility. He's low, affordable, cheap. And what he does is that healing can turn around very quickly. If you've timed it right and you've got several units on the board, or your opponent's got several units on the board that you're going to kill, you can heal your Warlord, 6 to 8 health, and then your opponent has got to dedicate resources to getting rid of him before they do anything else. It throws off the whole tempo of the game. I would say he should be the number one purchase that you're looking for when you go to the store. You can play Death Guard without Yu-Gi-Oh! But you will have a harder time. There are some cards, and this holds true for me. When I first started playing the game, I stayed away from playing Death Guard because I lacked a lot of key cards. It wasn't until much later that I had all the epics and legendary cards to make them work. And I do feel like they still feel that way. You need certain cards to play them, whereas Sons of Horus and the Emperor's Children, and even World Eaters, are very forgiving. You can put in a lot of neutral options, you can tweak and change, you can even throw in some less used high-cost troops if you need to. But the Death Guard are very specific. If you do not have certain cards, you will not get the most out of your cards, and you will visibly feel the difference when you're playing a game. Eisenstein is thematically a great card as far as story-wise. It's very pivotal. It has its moments. It has its moments with like an Ambassador Melgator, or if you were using Eisenstein for Gate on 5 energy to pull back the Sorak bikes. And now not only did you deal damage with the Sorak bikes, but now you've also got a 4/5 fast unit in your hand. This isn't a bad tactic. It's decently cost, but it doesn't see a lot of play. I think it sees more play. You could squeeze it into a Guerra deck. You're not going to get very much out of it in a Typhon deck, though. And event decks also utilize this card. For a beginner, it's not bad. If you can use this with Ambassador Melgator, you get 2 uses out of Ambassador Melgator. That's always good, too. The Executors. Now, these guys, I like the artwork. Their ability hasn't changed. Actually, I think their ability might have cost 2 at one point. It might have cost 2. Now it costs 1. If you're not doing poison, then these guys are just worthless. If you are doing poison, then they have a pivotal role, but they're also usable for attack, and they're just okay. I would prefer to have like a Zaggert Squad, which is the same stats but has a much better backlash, especially if I can help that backlash go towards a beefy health frontline troop. Or I'd rather have a Zaggert Squad. These guys are the ideal 3-drop that you want to have, because right off the bat you're getting a 4/4 and the added bonus of frontline. That's not a bad thing to have. Phosphix Bombs. Now, this card improved. This used to just be poison and enemy troop, and now you get the draw card. So that's better, and it works really well with Mortarion. It's basically in conjunction with his ability. It's a 5 energy destruction card. It's a 5 energy hard removal card with Typhon as well, because he's got the Destroyer Plague. So this is a good card to have, but it's mainly for those 2 Warlords. It's less effective for Dirk Rask, who can use his ability to do much more damage, and it's not effective at all for Guerra, who's not really concerned with poisoning troops. Vengeance is, I want to say, an essential epic. It really is. Whether you have 2 or 1, it's very useful in dealing with a threat troop, but it's also kind of their closer. And you could argue that Death Shroud is the Death Guard closer, and you're probably right. I mean, thematically and theoretically, the way the game plays, they certainly are. But Vengeance, for 2 of these on your Warlord can deal 8 damage out the gate. So that's pretty good. These stack. If they're not, you can still deal 5 damage. It's enough to wipe out a front line for your Death Shroud to do the action, or enough to assist your Death Shroud and destroy your Warlord. Usually it's used to eliminate troops, but it's effective. If you're playing Dirk Rask, it's even better because it gives him sneak attack, which combines with his ability. Because he's damaging by attacking him, he doesn't have to do a normal attack. If he's sneak attacking, that counts too, and then they get destroyed. It feels like a little bit of a waste there, but in a pinch, like if it's a big nasty Land Raider type troop, in a pinch that kind of works to help buy you some time. We talked about Zaggert Squad. Again, these are my preferred 3-drop Death Guard troops. I do not like Blessing of Nurgle. While the artwork has changed, and this is better artwork than it used to be, it's okay. Now, some people do like it. They like playing it with after First Wave, because you have 3 Meldon squads, and in the chance that those 3 survive, then you can give them +2 health as well as poisonous. but it feels like a waste of a tactic. It doesn't do anything for you offensively. The mark of chaos or poisonous effect in general doesn't do anything. You're paying 4 energy essentially to give your Astartes troops a 1 cost mark of Nurgle and 3 energy basically for that +0/+2, and that feels really off value. If this costs 3, it could be argued that it's a better card. I just think it's undercost or overcost for what it does. Command Bunker, again, this kind of ties back into cards that once were really good and were very good at supportive. It's got a decent rally effect, and as the event has shown, it's very useful in event decks. It's very nice in that tight format because it can support what you've got. But in a constructed build, its purposes have gradually fallen out the wayside, and people want much more responsive troops that are doing something. More importantly, if you have a frontline troop that can't attack on the board, you're not doing anything for yourself. You're just buying yourself time. And the way the meta is right now is it's not in a buy yourself time mode. It is attack, it is aggressive, it is deal damage. I think it is what it is. I think that stat-wise and what it does, it makes sense. But for what it does for the faction, compared to what it once did, it's not the same. It's not of the same value. Death Cloud is still valuable. Now, this card used to be not seen as much, but with the inclusion of cards like the Destroyer Plague, as well as, most importantly, Silent Death, stunning all undamaged enemies, it is a great way to just straight out poison your entire opponent's board, stun all their undamaged troops, and they all die on the next turn. There's nothing that your opponent can do about them. There is no card that removes stun on all units. If you, at that best, your opponent is able to remove stun on one of those units. So Death Cloud in a Mortarian deck is really good. Not even aiming for his whispers, just in the fact that he can poison everybody, stun them with Silent Death, and then if he's got one of his troops that he wants to keep alive, he can use his own ability, and that's all total only 9 energy to do that. So it's a good value. Do you need 2 of them in the deck? Probably not, but early on, this can really frustrate people, especially if they invested as many of their troops and their hand is looking low and they put everything on that they have on board. They can lose a lot. More Turk Squad is dated. Stat-wise, they cost okay. Their rally is okay. They're not fantastic. They might be seen in event decks. They're not a troop that gets played. 4-dial squad can get played. They are working decently in the Deathlord deck, which is no longer an option, but it's a deck. They've got a decent health. They've got that 5 health compared to, and they've got Unstoppable compared to 2 attack, 5 health, and a random mark of chaos. That Unstoppable is nice, but I'd like to see these guys gain flank. Even though they would be a 3-5 as opposed to your normal 5-3, it makes sense if they had a little bit more responsive cards within the Death Guard deck, and I think that would help speed them up. But as they are, they don't have that, so they're okay. Many people often play the Plague Marine instead, and this Relentless is a very nice Relentless, especially if you're able to increase the health on the Plague Marine. These guys can become a very big threat. However, they can also become a very big problem for the Death Guard player later in the game, because if they have a Plague Marine that won't die, and it's only 2 attack health, then that really prevents them from utilizing a card like Death Shroud, or playing troops that gain frontline or +1 stats if they're the first troop played. See, like if I play Zaggert Squad by itself, great, but if I've got a Plague Marine out, then I play Zaggert Squad, I'm just getting a 3-3. I'm not even getting a 4-4, and I'm not getting the frontline effect. These guys used to be a 3-6, actually. Their stats used to be better, but because of that Relentless, and because of how plotting effective that they were, they got dropped a bit. They still work, especially if you slap something like Favorite of Nurgle on them, or some other card that attacks, that enhances the attack value of your troops. But they're not bad. You don't always need to have them. I would figure if you have 1 in your deck, great. You're not missing out. If you have 2, that's good too. But there are some options either between the Plague Marine or 4-dial squad. And I do think that 4-dial squad gain flank. I'd rather have them than I would the Plague Marine. I don't see enough Captain Holgarg. He's okay. He's probably he's towards the bottom. I don't know if he's the worst legendary that the faction has. he doesn't do anything if you don't have any troops, though. He's a 6/4. If you don't have any adjacent troops to put him next to, then you gain nothing from this card. I feel like you really should. I feel like you should gain something. He should either be able to at least, or heal your warlord, or, stun your opponent's warlord. Something, because otherwise you're just playing a body that's 6/4 and you don't do anything else. Whereas you compare that to a lot of the other 5-cost legendary cards in other factions, and either they're more versatile or they always offer something. Whether your opponent has a troop or you have a troop, whatever it is, they're going to give you a bonus, and he is contingent upon you having a card. So that's probably why you don't see him as often. This is a decent tactic. It's very costly at 5 energy. However, its benefits are much better. You're giving a friendly troop. It does not have to be an Astartes. It can be a vehicle. It can be a demon. It can be a structure. A considerable stat bonus, +2/+4, as well as a Mark of Chaos. So for just 1 energy more, you're gaining a targeted effect that is arguably double as potent as that Mark of Nurgle, or the Blessing of Nurgle. You're getting the Favorite of Nurgle, and it's superior. And this is really good, especially if you can stick that onto a Death Shroud or a Plague Marine or a Plague Elite who are going to constantly heal. Their health is going to skyrocket. And if your Mark of Chaos ends up being Slanesh or Khorne, you have a monster of a troop. So this is a good card to include. Do you need to have it in every deck? No. 2 copies of? No. Just leave it at 1 and I think it'll be fine. First Wave is a super important common card, especially if you're starting out in the game. You want to have this. It buys you a turn. It might even buy you 2 turns. You're putting in 3 of the Meldon squads. And again, Meldon squad is up here. Now this card, believe it or not, it's 5 energy. It used to cost 4 energy. It went up in cost. And Meldon Squad went down in stats because remember it was 4 energy to get a 1/5. They might have been a 2/5, but they definitely had 5 health. Now you're paying 5 to get 3 of the same troops at less stats. But that is a sign of how effective and how potent and how frustrating the First Wave and the frontline and the redundancy of the Death Guard was. If you weren't playing frontline heavy Death Guard, then you weren't playing Death Guard. And your only option was Mortarian, maybe Rask, especially Rask later on because he was the 4th Warlord. So at the time it was really Mortarian. Guerra was not good. His ability, Guerra is probably the Warlord. I'm backtracking here, but Guerra's Warlord ability has changed about 5 times. Its current iteration is the longest standing one that he's had, but he was not a good performer. He was a terrible Warlord. He had terrible ability. It was like heal 2 to a friendly unit. Then it was heal 2 to himself. Then it was heal 1, can act again if you play a troop or you play it was so conditional, and then they gave him this ability and it's stuck around. It's been a lot more effective, but it took a lot of work to get him to where he is, and all the while he really wasn't utilizing many of these cards because these cards were evolving too. This is all beta and early release. Now Gorzlat's heavy support squad, I like the art, I like the idea, I don't like the ability. I feel like this ability is so overcosted for what it does, right? For 5 energy, first off, you have to pay this troop at 5. And then on your next turn, you're paying the full value that you just paid for this troop to deal 8 damage to a vehicle, structure, or Titan weapon. That is really overcosted when you compare it to a similar Devastator unit at 5 cost, right? Which these guys cost 4, and they're dealing essentially 8 damage as well, 4 to an enemy and 2 to adjacent units, and it's not even a specific type. It doesn't have to be a vehicle, structure, or Titan weapon. It can be anything. You're paying cheaper, you're getting splash damage, which arguably is more effective, and you're getting it out there. Or you've got Zaggert Squad, who are my favorite dudes. These guys don't have a rocket launcher, they've got heavy bolters, and for 1 less than what they cost, you're dealing 3 to an enemy and adjacent units. That's 9 damage for 4, whereas here you're paying 5 damage for 8, and it's specific. I feel like that needs to change. Otherwise, these guys don't see play, and the fact that they're a 4 attack means that they're susceptible to Ambassador Melgator. So you put them down, you think you're going to play him, your opponent bounces him back up to your hand. What's the point? I think if their ability cost 3, and it was exactly as it was, 3, but it's very specific, it would be effective. Otherwise, for 5 energy, you might just be better off saving your energy and then playing something like Earthsea Malevolus, right? For 7, who just is straight up going to destroy a vehicle. Like, if that's really what you're going to do, why play an ability that doesn't even function on a rally. You have to wait till your next turn. It's just not a good card. Zaggert Squad, I can't remember what these guys did initially, but they are better. Their ability changed all over the place. It's not even, they didn't have anything to do with poison initially, but now they can poison, or they can remove poison as a rally. These guys are really nice. They're 5/5 for 5 stat. That's a very healthy turnaround. Not a fan of the artwork, but as a support unit, these cards are really good. If you're playing Typhon or Mortarian. If you're not, these guys are arguable to include in your deck altogether. If you're playing Guerra, you really shouldn't be including too many troops below 4 attack, below 4 cost, I should say. Most of your stuff should be 2 to 3 cost. And if you're Rask, you should be including some more mid-range or tactics in place of that. Why poison when you can ping and then use Rask's ability? Purity Will is good. That feels like a general heal. I mean, you're healing 2 and removing poison from your units. That's all your units. So that's very good, especially if you've got a decent board. You don't have to worry about this going into adjacent units. It's going to heal to everybody. And sometimes late game, that is enough to turn the tide. But talking about turn tides, Endurance. This is the thing. This card used to cost 5, believe it or not. It was possible, late game, to get hit by 2 of these simultaneously. And you would lose 6 to everything on the board, and your opponent would heal 6, and it would just be frustrating. They changed that, so Endurance now costs 6. It's still very effective. It still deals 3 and heals 3. You need to have 2 of these in your deck. If you are thinking about playing Death Guard and you don't have at least 1, hold off, because you're not going to be able to understand or appreciate, or I guess get the actual experience. You're going to be missing a key integral part, and Endurance is super important. I cannot say enough of that. It is worth paying for in the shop. Now, Geisel Terminators, these guys used to be 6s, 6 attacks, and I think they used to cost 5, if I remember correctly. You got a lot for your money. These guys did a lot of work. Another card for inspiration and why Breach was necessary, because these guys, and they could just get nasty, especially if you threw like a Mark of Nurgle, a favorite of Nurgle on them. These guys are still good. They still do work. They're still a good 6-drop. They're probably better than the Gertrude Full Terminator Squad. These guys are the common version, and then you've got the rare version. Yes, they have lower attack, but the fact that they've got higher health, and most importantly, can give you frontline to help, buy you time. That's really important. Plague Elites. Now, I cannot recall if these guys always had 3 attack. I feel as if they used to have 4 attack at one point. But they always had the poisonous, and they always had the fully heal. And in the same way that Plague Marines are good, so too are Plague Elites. They're very costly for what they are now, though. Losing that 4 attack, or maybe 5, but where they're at for 3 attack, it just... Ambassador Melgator can bounce these guys really quick and easy, and they don't do enough offensively for you against a Warlord who doesn't use a lot of troops. So you're better off holding your energy for a better troop like Ignatius Groger, or just straight up the Death Shroud. Save your energy. More importantly, why pay 6 for this guy when you can pay 6 for this guy? You're going to get the same health, but you're going to get 2 extra defense. You're going to get a troop who cannot be bounced by Melgator, and you're going to get frontline, which is going to buy you time. Now, Groger has been arguable to be overcosted for what he is. His ability wasn't anything like this before. When he died, he had a backlash. He was like, put 2 Plague Marines in your hand. That was it. You're paying 7 to put out a guy who was okay. When he died, you got 2 troops that you could play on your turn. Very slow. Very slow. This faction plays slow. It has played slow since day 1, but they play efficiently. However, now his rally is, he gives you a little bit of a speed bump. He buys you time with the Meldon squad. And then also, Groger gives you that speed bump with Meldon, and then when he dies, he gives you a Plague Marine. So there's something there. You get a little bit of value. Just by his 7 cost, you're getting his 5/4 body plus a 4 cost Plague Marine, as well as a 1 cost Meldon, right? All the way up top there. So it's decent value. I would like to see his attack be better, though. He's designed to die, but I would like to see his attack as a 6/4 for that cost, but it's okay. Now, Cargo Squad... No, these guys, I mean, the backlash is okay, but again, Urtsu Malevolus is the same cost, and you get an immediate effect. just very slow. Just, I mean, hidden for 7 is nice, but these are also a vehicle, so they're susceptible to cards that damage vehicles and get rid of vehicles. And I'd like to see a little bit more out of that. Specter of Death, unfortunately, has changed. This card used to be not just, I mean, it's destroyed an enemy. It was hard damage, but then you would get 2 Nurglings on the board. So you would also have 2 troops. This card was really good with Rask because you could use those Nurglings to ping things and use Rask's ability. You would have troops that you could rely upon. That is not the case anymore. I think that the change that they did here to this, while as much as they tried to help by giving this the ability to poison adjacent troops, I feel as if it actually reduced the effect of this card. You still want to have one of these in your deck. Make no mistake. You still want to have one of these in your deck because it's very good, but it's not as good. Now, in terms of epics, probably the second most important epic to have. The most important one being Endurance. The second most important epic to have is Death Shroud, and you want to have 2 of these guys. And these guys, as has been shown in the events, if you've been playing the event, if you just look at the stats, it's an 8/8, and if it dies, you don't have any other troops in play, you get an 8/8 back. It requires your opponent to do one thing, and one thing only to deal with it, and that's to jam it. They can stun it, but if you're playing Mortarion, you just unstun it. So they can't do anything about that, and that is deadly. They can put Frontline in front of it, and that's just going to slow it down. So Mortarians, Death Shroud, these guys are just nasty. I love the artwork on them. They're very effective, and I recommend that that's probably your number 2 epic pickup. Again, though, this is a faction that really requires all these pieces to function at a whole at the best. It doesn't matter if you're the only warlord who does not need Death Shroud is Guerra. To be honest, everybody else makes ample use of him. Halden Tal, I like this Dreadnought compared to the other Dreadnought. He has less attack, but he does more damage. He's got Frontline, and his ability is crazy. Yes, he's a vehicle. Yes, he's not in every deck. If you have an 8 cost and you have a dilemma between Halden Tal and Death Shroud, you should always be picking Death Shroud. But you cannot deny that that's impressive. And as a character, Halden Tal was pretty rough. Pretty rough, bro. Mortarion's Resolve is better than it used to be. This used to cost 10. It stuns all enemies, it heals 5 to your Warlord, but it also now has the added advantage of returning your hand to your deck and drawing 5 cards, which either A, is going to give you 5 cards compared to 2 or 3, or it's going to lower your hand size, get you 5 new cards, and build up your deck so that you're not overdrawing. This card has so many uses and purposes that it actually works way better than it ever did. At 10 energy, that's all you were doing was stunning your opponent's board and healing 5. It wasn't letting you play anything else. It wasn't letting you buy extra time. It wasn't letting you capitalize on anything. For 2 energy, you can do a lot. You can put down a troop. You can play another tactic. You can use an ability. 2 energy will do a lot for you. And this card is really good. Now, Mordant, it's got shield, but it is one of those cards where just meh. And the same goes for the Imperial Reaper. These guys are both vehicles. They're both really nasty, but for cost and for the fact that a crack grenade, Urtzi Malevolus, even cards that don't straight out destroy vehicles, but that mess with vehicles, things like Design Flaw. It can change that big nasty 10-9 to a 10-1, right? Or we're talking Dirk Rask. If Dirk Rask were to sneak attack that, it's gone. Or if you've got a card like Telemach, which stuns all vehicles, it's just not great. And the only reason I play the Imperial Reaper is for my frontline challenge deck, just to throw that out there. Doesn't do anything for you. As an epic, this feels like just the waste of an epic. It's overcosted. It doesn't do anything on a rally. It doesn't do anything on the long term of the game compared to the Sons of Horus, who their epic tank is, at 10, you're getting the effect to immediately destroy a random enemy troop, and arguably better stats with the higher attack, a little less damage there, but the fact that you're destroying a troop, you don't have to worry about frontline. Big difference. So that's the Death Guard, guys. They've held up okay. The problem with the Death Guard is two things. Number one, they often get outshined by the shiny new things, the decks that have flank and fast. And this faction is lacking flank. This faction is lacking a lot of offensive rally. A lot of their rally effects have got, frontline, giving a stat buff, giving poisonous. They don't do anything offensively. They're not damaging anything. They're not destroying anything. At best, they're poisoning something. So they're very slow. They're very plodding, and that's their second. Their second problem is because a lot of the players play the game don't like that play style. I enjoy playing Mortarian, but I can only take him in doses because, not that I don't enjoy the playstyle, but if I want to play my 5 wins, I don't want to spend 45 minutes to get those 5 wins. If I'm playing an event run with him and playing 12 event runs, like I did this last weekend, all these points here in the lodge, this is just Monday morning, these 2,000 event points were all Mortarian. And that was spread out over 2.5 days because that's all I could really endure and stomach. I had to take breaks in between, not just because I was playing Mortarian, but because this event specifically was a lot of Mortarian mirror matches. So it was a draining thing, and they're fun games. I think they're very good cerebral, and you've got a lot more control and checks and bounces, and you know this card's going to come, and I've got a plan, and everything's going to work out. But it takes a lot of time to process all that, and it takes a lot of time to play all that. And if you don't have that time, you are going to get more out of playing a Dirk Rask. You're going to get more out of playing, Horus or Korax or anybody else who plays faster and has faster supportive troops. The Sons of Horus can just straight deal damage. They don't need to poison you. They're just going to deal damage and kill your Warlord outright. That's not the game that the Death Guard play. They can be very viable. I do not recommend them for beginners, even though there are some Warlords who are more forgiving for beginner players. As a faction, if I was a new player and I were to play the Death Guard, I would be either frustrated and bored with the game, or kind of turned off, like I feel as if I'm not on the same level of interaction with my opponent. Time and experience allow you to understand and appreciate certain Warlord and matchups a lot better. I bring up Mortarion because of what he can do, but you have to have all the right cards, you have to have the right understanding, you have to have the right mentality when you go into those games. Whereas opposed to like a Guerra, you can just play straightforward and feel as if you're doing okay, but you will feel as if you're lacking some decent support options. There's no direct damage here aside from Endurance and Blight Grenade, and even that is very minimal. Endurance is more used for the healing than it is for the damage. I mean, damaging is nice, but it's really more for the healing, the 3, and swinging that board. So that's it. I hope this has been useful. I hope the card-by-card reboot, the next one we're going to do, looks like is going to be Iron Warriors. We're going to do Iron Warriors card-by-card reboot. Oh, really quickly, I should mention here at the end of all this, the counterattack for the Death Guard, because this is new to the game, and this was not in the game until Friday. Heal 2 to your Warlord. Now, a lot of people often say, this is the worst counterattack that's out there. I feel like this is terrible, and compared to what they are, they've got some low initiative Warlords. They really have Typhon and Mortarion who are low. But healing 2 to your Warlord in a faction that is healing heavy, a Warlord who can heal 3 to himself every turn, and then get an additional free heal 2, that's a lot. That actually goes a long ways. It's not healing to your troops, but the Death Guard don't need to heal the troops too much. There's not a lot of troops in here that they're super reliant on. As a matter of fact, the only troops that they can be reliant on are either troops that heal themselves or troops that simply replace themselves. I don't want to heal 2 to my Ignatius Groger. I want my Plague Marine. I don't need to heal 2 to my Zaggert Squad. I want them to buy me time, and I want to get my Death Shroud out. And then I want to buy all the time I can for my Warlord. And if that gives me a free heal 2 to my Warlord, it works. Now, comparing counterattacks side by side with other legions is not a smart thing to do. What it is important is to take a look at how they work with that legion specifically and how they compare. I think in general, the theme seems to be that the counterattacks for the higher initiative Warlords, who are not going to have a counterattack that often, are stronger. And the low initiative factions who have counterattack more often are less key, but you're also likely to get it more frequently. I'm never going to say no to healing 2 for free. If I combine this with Mortarian's Resolve late game, and I don't need to, but if I do, that's healing 7. If I for 8, so that's a pretty good turnaround. But just using that in conjunction with Yu-Gi-Oh! And the good old-fashioned Purity of Will, Warlord abilities like Guerra's ability and Callous Typhon's ability, Typhon more specifically, you can really get a lot more out of it than it looks like on the surface. And the troops that they have, they don't want to keep alive. As much as they are a troop-heavy deck, they really just want this guy out, and that's it. And then don't jam him and give him all the cookies. And if I can buy myself my Warlord 2 to 3 extra, 5 extra health, 6 extra health here and there, and the Death Shroud is hitting you for 8, good game. That's the way it works. It's not fancy. It's not fast. It's what the Death Guard do. That's how they play. This is how they play. And some people, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. They play well. They don't play fantastic. They have areas that they could certainly be better in. I think several of these cards just don't work anymore or on the same level that they used to. I think Wall of Bodies and Command Bunker feel like cards that are dated. Executors is limited to certain Warlords. The Reaping is better than it used to be, but not good. Communition, Shield Up, these cards just aren't fantastic. But when you get hit for 8 every turn by the Death Shroud, you realize that they are still just as potent as they always are. It just takes them a while to get to that point. So if you like that challenge, if you're looking to get in Death Guard, you'd need some specific cards, and I hope this helps outline the cards that you need and why you need them and how to use them. And I hope this has been helpful for you. If you liked the video, please like it. If you aren't already subscribed, subscribe. Let your friends know. Spread the word, folks. Spread the word. And until then, we'll talk to you next time. Keep playing Legions. Bye.